Professor Dow says hello to everyone. She's just finishing dinner, so off camera. Okay, I think a few more people will be joining us, but I'm going to go ahead and record, and then I'm going to, oh, somebody's already on top of that. All right, wonderful. So hello, everybody. My name is Sharon Sabota. I'm the director of the Center for Women and Gender Equity. We are rounding out Women's History Month at the official designated month of March, strong, with our final program that's happening in the month of March. So I'm really pleased to have some of our community engagement students from Professor Dow's Ethnic Studies course who are going to be engaged, or who are going to be facilitating and participating in the panel today. And so I'm going to hand over the floor to Sophia and Natea, who will get us started and introduce the panelists.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us today. We have a lot of great panelists, and hopefully we'll be having a great conversation. And at the end, we'll have some room for questions for everyone else in the group. You guys can see my screen, right? Okay. So the main idea of our event tonight is how our multiple and different identities help fuel our activism or the things that we're passionate about, and then the work that we either currently pursue or hope to pursue after we graduate from college or have graduated. So some of our panelists today, we have Lauren Michelle Stevens with us. She is a St. Mary's College of California alumni and rower who is now a pastor in the Lafayette United Methodist Church. After graduation, she returned to Ireland for a year, and then upon her return to the United States, served as director of student ministries at Community UMC in Half Moon Bay. Her time as director of student ministries led her to desire further theological education, and she moved to Washington, D.C. in 2015 to attend Wesley Theological Seminary. And Teo, if you want to introduce Eno.
Yes, everyone please ignore the baby noises. So sorry about that. So Eno is a skilled operations coordinator who's passionate about her projects, processes, and organization. Her skills have shined in different environments, ranging from clinical administration and sales to event coordinating, ABA therapy, and diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives. Some of her personal projects include running a small art business, curating exhibitions, and freelance event coordinating. Okay, hey, this is me. My name is Natea, also known as Tay or whatever you want. I'm a 22-year-old transfer from Spelman College, and I am now majoring in JCL at St. Mary's. I am a single mom of this whining 10-month-old baby named Messiah, who I love dearly. And today I will probably weigh in about my experience as an adoptee and how that has helped me see the world and decide what I want to do with my life.
Sorry, I was trying to find the unmute button. But hi, everyone. I'm Sophia. I am a Mexican immigrant. I moved to this country when I was 15, and my experience with the immigration system really showed me how privileged my experience was and how most people don't have that experience. And for most people, it's a system they quite literally have to fight against. And so immigration reform is something I'm very passionate about. I have previously worked with the International Rescue Committee, which is a nonprofit that provides services to immigrants and refugees. And I really want to pursue a JD in immigration law after I graduate from St. Mary's. So that will lead us right into our first question, which is, what are some of the identities you have? And I know we touched a little bit on this on each of our bios, but I don't want to speak for our panelists. I know we may have missed some parts of who you are. For me, like I said, being an immigrant really defined my experience, but I'm also a student athlete on campus. I like to consider myself a dog mom. I'm obsessed with my dog. I'm a sister. But yeah, I will open it up to see if you guys want to share anything else that we may have missed in your bios and introductions.
I'll go ahead and share that I am queer and neurodivergent, and I'm also an adoptee and a millennial.
As for me, I am also the daughter of immigrants, Nigerian immigrants to be specific, and that's an experience in itself. A college graduate, as well as a local Bay Arean. I am an artist as well, and yeah, those are just the ones that come top of my head.
In addition to being an adoptee, I'm a Black woman. I am a dancer. I am also a dog mom, although it's been kind of overshadowed by being a human mom. And I guess I'll take on the role of single mom once again in that light.
Okay, thank you so much everyone for sharing. So our next question is, what are some of the struggles that you face growing up as you and as yourself with all your different identities and who you identify as? And so for me, I know that one of the biggest struggles that I faced, particularly working in the immigrant community, is showing up as someone that may not particularly be able to relate with my community in a lot of aspects. Like I came from a really privileged background, both in terms of like immigration, but also like who I am as a Mexican immigrant. Like I lived in a gated community when I lived in Mexico. My dad is like the CEO of a company, and when I'm helping my community, I realize that I come from a different place. So I think navigating that situation of like, how do I help my community and how do I give back without it seeming like I'm trying to save my own community, you know, like helping them, but also understanding that they also have a lot to teach me and they have a lot to give me. I'm not just, you know, feeding them the information or providing them with some services. So I think that's a situation that has been hard for me to navigate as an immigrant, but also like a Mexican being, you know. But it's been really amazing to hear a lot of the stories that these people have that have absolutely inspired me and shaped my perspective. And so I'll hand it off. I'll open up the floor in any regards of any struggles or situations that have been affected by how you present yourself.
I can share. I think the experience of privilege is really interesting because I realize that myself individually, I am privileged, but at the same time, there are parts of my background that are not. So it's really interesting, to have all these labels like, college graduate and, having a full-time job and things of that. But then at the same time, when I turn around and look at even someone as close to my family as my mom and, like where I grew up and how I grew up, it's like, or it's interesting how even in maybe unprivileged communities, you can find those little sectors of, privileged folks, which is a very interesting and difficult juxtaposition. Showing up with all of those differences and nuances has been a very interesting and challenging yet rewarding experience in the workforce. People tend to have assumptions because of how I present myself, a Black woman, they think XYZ. And then, when things get kind of rough, they're a little bit surprised. The biggest one is always like, oh, I didn't know you were that educated and that, detail oriented. Even though it's unspoken, you can tell it's kind of there with how they approached me. So that's just one example of how the different backgrounds kind of flow together, sometimes with each other, sometimes against. It always just makes for an interesting experience because I never really know what I'm gonna get, but I'm always down with it. And for those who like to challenge it, I'm always like excited to challenge it back. So yeah.
I feel like my identities as like a queer female tend to clash with my identity as a United Methodist pastor. Pastor tends to be dominated by white, straight men, generally who are married, wife, kids, that whole thing. And in the United Methodist denomination, while my conference, the California Nevada Conference, is open and inclusive, the denomination as a whole believes that being LGBTQ is incompatible with Christian teaching. And so I think it's a constant reminder of like the messaging put forth by the denomination that believes that like who I am is not able to do what I do.
I feel like I can also relate to the idea of privilege in several ways, which I've been like trying to like come to terms with for the last couple years, especially as I'm adopted, but I also know my birth family, which is like a super weird sort of reality. And so I don't know how many of you guys are from like the Bay Area, but I grew up in Marin County with an older white mother. I do not claim Marin. It is like past me. No one needs to know that. I'm really from Oakland, but no, really. I grew up in Marin. I was one of like a couple Black kids in every school I went to over there. And I was very Black and I'm mixed. And so trying to like be myself at that age was really hard. Like Black kids didn't like me once I transferred to a school that had a little bit of diversity. The white kids definitely didn't like me. And I feel like I denied my Blackness up until like 4th or 5th grade, which is pretty profound because I knew I was Black and I just didn't want to like internalize it, which is like not it. So I struggled a lot with that growing up. And then I feel like just coming out of high school, I started to be like, okay, I know myself. I'm okay being myself with white people, with Black people, with both. And like, I don't need to code switch all the time. I still find myself doing it sometimes, but the point is it was hard growing up and I'm just now coming out of it, feeling confident. Yeah.
I just want to add to our panelists, if you feel like commenting on someone's like comment, you feel free to unmute at any point. We don't have to just like answer questions. Like if you have a comment, feel free to step in. Tay, do you want to ask the next question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say this question is like pretty much just what I was talking about. But what impact did your family structure have on shaping your perspective of the world and your place within it? And since I'm already off mute, oh yeah, I'm gonna just go ahead and keep talking. So since I came from a place of wealth, not my family per se, like we're Bay Area poor, but like living around so much wealth, so much white privilege, and so much ignorance was really interesting when I have, I guess, what you would call a woke Caucasian mother. I mean, she is, but she's still white. And so I just feel like I have a very unique perspective coming from like an overly privileged public school to a severely underfunded, under-resourced Oakland school. And I'm talking about my experience in middle school, and it was a shock. And so I just think my mom raising me the way she did allowed me to somehow navigate those spaces. But it's just such a stark like contrast. And anyways, I'll let someone else talk about their life.
I also have a relationship with my birth family, and I think it's an interesting combination of like that has benefited me as an adult in practical ways like medical history, and also just in being able to work through some of like the trauma parts of adoption in a different way than if I didn't have those connections. And I think I grew up raised by a single mom, and she really gets all the credit for her teaching me like determination and perseverance. And I think I didn't grow up in a community that had a lot of single parents, or, you know, I grew up in the South Bay, rich, wealthy Bay Area. We were not, but because of where we lived and everything, I got all the benefits of that, and all the benefits of white privilege, in the way that afforded me an education that I got because of you know, what I looked like, regardless of the income of my family. And so I think also I didn't stand out, and in I think that regard, I also had privilege as an adoptee, that I got to choose on what terms I shared that information about myself, and how that did or didn't affect me in certain spaces, because it wasn't visible. And so, but I think the thing I'm most grateful for is my mom, and the determination and perseverance that she taught me and showed me.
Well, for me, it's very interesting. As I mentioned, I come from a Nigerian family. And so that literally probably shapes my entire being and work, including like resistance as well. Because in our community, you have four options. You're an engineer, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, or you're a disgrace. And I proudly chose the road, you know, of being a disgrace. I was like, that's my choice, and I'm proud of that because nothing else quite fits me. So with that, there's immense pressure to perform well. So you want to talk about code switching, where those, like, you know, voices still kind of show up even now in the back of your head, because I'm always thinking you had to perform well. You had to perform this particular way because that was ingrained growing up. With that, I too come from a single parent household, just me and my mom. And so, you know, with her economic status was definitely very different, but it was interesting because I always went to a private school growing up. Again, I was like maybe the only Black girl in my school, maybe definitely less than 20 of us. And then you want to talk about being the only African. So that's a whole interesting level as well. When it comes down to something as simple as people pronouncing your name, because no one knows how to say Eno. I was going by Eno up until high school, when a teacher was like, no, we're going to call you by your real name. And I was like, cool, girl, but can you pronounce it? Because I'm tired. I am tired. So, and then interesting being in private school and high school as well, but then also going to a public school. So, you know, a lot of nuances, a lot of back and forth. But so there's a lot of balance between privilege, those moments of living in privilege, and maybe not directly living in it or as evidently, but also still having it because it doesn't necessarily leave in those certain ways in regards to like education. But then there's also like the juxtaposition of my mom being a single mom and her not having, you know, financial stability all the time, but yet I'm somehow in private schools. So all of that. And of course, with a cultural background, there's this expectation that you have to present yourself as a particular way, as if we're all cookie cutters, right? So it's a lot that goes into what I'm supposed to be. And throughout the years, just kind of keeps building and building and building till eventually got to the point where it's like, wait a minute. No. And that mostly came at St. Mary's, which was a beautiful place to experience that. And yet we all know exactly what privilege looks like at St. Mary's. So, and then, you know, me just being in a time at SMC where I was just like, you know, resisting against those beliefs that had shaped me growing up was very interesting because, as you could imagine, there was a lot of pushback, especially in my art, which was interesting because I was that student around campus who you probably knew my name, maybe not for the best reasons, probably because I said something that rocked the boat on a microphone at a protest, and I repeated it 20 times. But I think also because of the privilege growing up, there also was comfort in knowing who I am, you know, in a sense, in a degree, and knowing what I know. So it made it easier to show up in those spaces where maybe like opposition was being, you know, pushed against me. So that's my little soapbox.
Thank you for sharing. I feel like 99% of the things you just shared, I was like, yeah, me too. Yeah, especially when you mentioned that like the pressure, the family pressure of like, this is what you have to be, or like, and it's funny because I ended up wanting to be a lawyer, but not because of those reasons. But it's so funny because my entire life I said, oh, I don't want to be a lawyer because my parents want me to be a lawyer. But then it's just what I ended up falling in. Not that I'm a lawyer, but like wanting to pursue. In terms of like what I think a big way my family structure shaped who I am. I grew up in Mexico, which is like a very conservative / traditional place. And so gender roles are like very, very prevalent. And so my mom's a stay-at-home mom. She's never worked like a day in her life. As soon as she got married to my dad, she completely quit working. And so my mom was always at home. You know, she's the greatest person. I love my mom, but she's the hardest worker, but it never goes noticed because she works at home. And she's also very quiet. She's just like at home and like that's what she does. And so I think for me, growing up, I realized like, not that my dad was like misogynist towards her or anything. It was just like it was part of the system. It was like a symptom of the system. But I realized that that's not what I wanted to be. Like I wanted to like stand up for myself. I never wanted to be like a stay-at-home mom, which is like what society in Mexico told me I should want to be. Is that in Mexico, like the family structure, you get married to a rich man and that's your goal. Like that's what you should want to strive for. But growing up around that structure, I realized like I don't want to be that. And like I see my mom and I see that she has all this potential that, you know, she never got to like kind of use. And so now, you know, like through the years, like I encouraged her, my sister and I have encouraged her to apply to jobs, and we've gotten to help her with like resumes. And like, it's been a really fun experience to like go in this full circle and like now giving her back the power. But for me, growing up in my family and seeing my mom in this situation where she couldn't really speak up and she didn't really have any like power for herself, like even money, like she just depended on my dad, made me realize that I want to stand up and like I want to stand up so that I don't end up in that situation. But now it's been like really fun getting to like come full circle and like giving back that power to my mom and like a lot helping her like apply to jobs and apply to like volunteering work and like getting involved and getting to like create her own name for herself has been really fun. And then I think that actually leads us into the next question. I forgot to share my screen earlier, but I will put it on here. So I know we spoke a little bit about what we all have done, what we are passionate about, what inspires us in our little introductions, but I would love to hear more about what our panel is like. What led you to the work that you are currently doing? I would love to hear, since you guys all have such different backgrounds and experiences. So yeah, what led you to pursue all the multiple things that you do now?
I can go, although I haven't actually completed anything yet. I don't know like what I wanted to be when I grew up. I went through like, I want to be a doctor. And I was like, I want to be a police officer until I realized that they kill Black people regularly. I want to be a firefighter. Like I went through all of that kind of stuff. And then I was probably at some point like, I want to be a dancer. And it took like a real reality check. Sorry, y'all, he's like losing his mind. For me to realize what I wanted to do. Growing up adopted, I feel like I hated being adopted. I don't feel that way now, but it took like a lot of working through, I guess, my trauma or whatever to realize that. And so I will make this story short, although I will tell anyone who will give me a listening ear because I think it's great. But since I know my birth family, we've always been like in close contact. I text my birth mother every day. I know most people, excuse me, no, we're not in the meeting. Here, phone, take it, bad mom. But I know everyone is the point. And they're so different from my adoptive mom and like the raising I got. And that's really when I realized my privilege. But anyways, so my birth mom has a sister and she's probably 30-ish by now. And she was living homeless in Sacramento, which is about 2 hours from here in Oakland, with her 2 kids in hotels, in cars, everything bad, basically. And she always would ask me for money. And I did not have any because I was a broke college student, but I offered childcare. And so I ended up with my 5-year-old cousin for the summer. and she had never been to preschool, daycare, summer camp, any sort of like social activity with kids her age. Her speech was like, you couldn't even understand her. She did not know her numbers, her alphabet, et cetera, et cetera. And I had her for a whole summer, and I signed her up for dance because I'm a dancer. You know, she had my bed. She got 3 meals a day. She did everything like a kid is supposed to do. And so by the end of the summer, I was like, there's no way I can, give me one moment. There's no way I can bring her to live back in a car or in a hotel after like living in a house and being normal. And so long story short, I found her other parent who had been absent. I brought her to live with him. I helped them fill out court papers. They got full custody of her, and she went to kindergarten and did everything that, you know, a kid is supposed to do. And that's when I was like, oh my God, I want to be a social worker. I want to adopt kids. Like, I want to do it. After being like, I'm never going to adopt. I hate being adopted. Like, I would never be a foster mom, none of that. And now I'm like all for it. Obviously, I do not have a degree yet, but I feel like I do. So that is what I want to do with my life. And I'm going to go handle this child now.
What I do now for, yeah, I'm gonna echo the applause of everyone else. What I do now is very not related to what I studied at St. Mary's. In fact, I'm pretty sure that like the worst class I had was like Christian history or what, like that was not a good class for me. I really struggled through it, but I majored in environmental studies, minor in politics, did marine bio, lived abroad for a year while I was at St. Mary's, and just really did a lot of marine biology work even after graduating. I sort of accidentally ended up as a pastor, worked for a church, and realized that like I didn't want to teach children and young people things that I didn't understand and didn't really know anything about. And so I decided to go to seminary. And I think my favorite part, I went to seminary, which is like getting a master's of divinity. I went to grad school thinking that I would end up with a lot of answers. And I did on like a book level. But I think my favorite part was the freedom to ask questions about religion and about my faith and about the world. And I think that's my favorite part as a pastor, is providing spaces where people can ask questions, can be uncertain, can have doubts, can have struggles with their lives, and can find community regardless. And I think that's why I kind of ended up in the space that I'm in. And I think it's my background from St. Mary's, even though it didn't really have anything to do practically with what I ended up studying, really helped me in ways I didn't understand at the time. The amount of like environmental justice trips and work that I did at St. Mary's that ended up playing such a big role in my understanding of faith and social justice, and how for me those are inextricably intertwined. And so it's definitely not what I thought I was doing as a college student, but I really love where I ended up. So.
For me, the first dream job that I had as a kid was being a designer, a fashion designer specifically. And then as I got older, I realized you are not fashionably inclined whatsoever. So we gotta let that go. And then I thought I wanted to be a physical therapist because my goal was like, okay, I like basketball and I want to help people, 2 + 2 = 4. Quickly got into St. Mary's, took some chemistry and calc courses and realized this is not the life for me. Um, clock's a ticking. You're running out of time, and that FAFSA is not going to extend beyond 4 years. We gotta go. So it was really interesting. So then, rather than, I've always been a very resistant kid, where it's like you can tell me to do something as small as like put on earrings. That's what a girl does, and I'm like, no, I don't want to put on earrings. I'm not going to. So then when it came time to figure out what major I actually wanted to do, rather than picking a course that was already predetermined, I made my own major. Apologies, I have to brag about it as much as I am in debt. I have to brag about it. But just having that agency to create my own path. And so with that, it was nice to pick from what I had already taken, what I needed to take, and then build from that. And I feel like in a way that sentiment of like looking at what I've already done and looking at my own interests rather than what's predetermined has played out in multiple ways. So my definition of an artist has evolved since then, and it's always changing. Visual arts is not necessarily my thing anymore. And a turning point came after I was working with, as an ABA therapist, so working with kids with autism. And then also doing a lot of reflective work and noticing, some of these behaviors and tendencies are within yourself as well. So then that created an interest in trying to think of ways to combine neuropsych and art. And what does it mean to maybe manipulate our environments, and how does that, through art, and how does that maybe create certain responses within us, right? So all those things have kind of like shaped my definition of art as I've gotten older, as well as just being very inquisitive. I love human behavior, and I love the question why. Why do we act this way? Why do we respond this way? I just think it's so fascinating, and I'm a little bit obsessed with it. So, being that and having the freedom of being an artist, like you really just get to tackle any question really that you have. And there's a lot of freedom and liberty in that, and a lot of agency as well. And so, as I've gotten older, that's definitely been something very near and dear to me. So yeah, that's how it kind of came about to be. And it's nice because now I get to just do different art things on the side, like, being a curator, or, having a small business, and just figuring out what I like to do, and maybe non-traditional art career paths that we were taught about 5-10 years ago. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I'm like making a list of all these questions I want to ask you all, but I want to get through the couple ones we have first. In terms of, oh yeah, like what led to the work that I want to do. So I also had no idea what I wanted to do for like the longest time, until it came time to apply to college. And they always asked like, what do you want to major in? And just filling that out was so stressful. It also feels like there was all this pressure to decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life as like a 17-year-old who had like no idea about anything in the world. But I was thinking about what I wanted to do, and I was really really privileged to have a college counselor that worked with me, and she asked me to think about something that I was passionate about. And that's when I thought about the immigration system and how my experience had been, but I didn't even know that an immigration lawyer existed. When I thought of like lawyers in my head, I always thought about like criminal defense lawyers, and that to me sounded like I could never live with like defending someone that like had murdered someone. So like that always felt like a conflict of interest. When my parents mentioned like you should be a lawyer like my entire life, I just kept saying like absolutely not. I also thought that like a lawyer had to like memorize every single law in the entire universe, which I just thought there would be no space for that in my brain. So for the longest time, I just kept saying like absolutely not, until I talked to my college counselor, and I mentioned like, well, this experience really shaped who I am. So how can I work with that? Like, what can I do with that? And then she said like, oh, immigration lawyers exist. And then that was like a big turning point in my life. And then when I came to St. Mary's, I knew like the entire time that I've been here I'm a politics major and an econ double major. So like I've known the entire time this is what I want to do. And so getting to work at the International Rescue Committee last summer was really kind of like a wake-up call. Like absolutely, like getting to work with people in this field and getting to help people in this way was absolutely like, yeah, 100%, this is what I want to do. And then our next question is, here you go. How do you see your multiple identities center the work that you do or you aspire to do? So I know we mentioned, I know Lauren, for example, you mentioned how being queer in a faith community can be really complicated and like a very interesting relationship. So I'm interested to hear more about that.
I think for me, the denomination is currently undergoing a split over a lot of issues, but the main one being LGBTQ and United Methodism Christianity and how they go together. I think for me, even though it's a struggle sometimes to have kind of your employer or who you work for, you know, continually say that what you do is not possible or allowed, that you know, whether we allow it or not, LGBTQ people will keep existing. And so for me, it's a way that I can show others, whether they are you know, somewhere safe where they can be themselves or not, that it is possible to be authentically yourself and that it is okay and that like God will still love you and that it is not like God loves you in spite of who you are, but because of who you are. And so I think that as long as I can offer that to others and as long as I'm somewhere where I have the ability to serve in a position and share that message with others, that's what I want to do. And I think, yes, it's difficult, but it would be so much more difficult being the person who thinks that like God hates them simply because of who they are. And too often that is the role that particularly Christianity has played in the world. And so I think if I can offer something different than that, then that's what I should be doing.
For me, I think that growing up, I was always told no. Like how you're being is wrong. You know, within my community, like, you know, cousins and family, which was twofold, but within my, not my biological family, because that's different, but you know, like in our community, it's like, you know, close family, friends, aunties, uncles, doesn't matter. So within that community, I was one of maybe the only kid who went to private school. So of course it was like, I'm still just like everybody else, but because of that, I was othered, which was very isolating growing up. And then just feeling like, you know, maybe when it comes to gender, like you have to present yourself this way because you're a girl and not agreeing with that because, you know, to me, why do I have to wear earrings and wear lip gloss and know how to cook? What the heck? Like, are you telling everyone else this? Are you telling the boys this? You're absolutely not. So those are just, you know, just two ways at the top of my head that I can think. But in different scenarios and different identities, I was always being told what to be, and always being told that who I was wasn't okay and that I should be something different, and that I don't fit in. So I think that as I grew up over time, eventually I just became tired of that. And it didn't really grow from confidence. It grew from just being weary in the sense of like, that's not going to be me moving forward. You know what I mean? Like, you can try to put me in a box, but that's not what I'm going to live in. I'm going to climb out of it. So over time now, learning how to have agency for myself with amazing mentors on campus as well, and then using that in turn to turn around and try to empower other people where it's like, they can think they can tell you no, they might think that, but we know what we know. And you know what I mean? So it's very different. And so, pair that with being an artist and basically having the freedom to create and express whatever you want. It's very liberating now to go from a stage of being like told no, 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 no. And now when it's like you're the one, or I'm the one who's dictating and creating that narrative for myself. So that has definitely inspired the beauty to continue being an artist and continuing to deliver a message the way that I see fit and the way that works best for my expression and my comfort levels and all that good stuff, while also trying to bring community in and just have a space for them to connect as well, or even just simply reflect if they may not feel comfortable enough to step forward and actively engage by sharing and outputting their own opinions and things of that nature.
So I wanted to ask, I know you mentioned earlier that you created your own major. And so I love this theme of like resistance and like creating your own path that you've been sharing. So I'm wondering if you could share more about what that journey of creating your own major looked like, and if you faced any major challenges along the way. I think it's fascinating, the idea that you just like sat down and like, this is my path, this is what I want to do. So I'd love if you could share more about that.
Absolutely. It's funny because it came to one day I was just like, man, I'm sick of this. Chemistry is not working. I'm running out of time. I want to do psych, art, and social, but I can't do it all. And then I was just like, is there a way to just make my own major? Like, there is. Fortunately, it was pretty straightforward in the sense of what they required. And lucky for me, I pulled from classes that I already took. And then I also looked at the standards for the art therapy, like accreditation, the board of accreditation, and then, pulled from things of those classes that I need to take and just, combine them. Again, luckily, the questions they asked in the petition were straightforward for me, so it was just pretty quick to answer. I was that student who yes, I had an advisor, but did I really? It was mostly me keeping up with all the classes that are ever changing. So it was relatively straightforward to create the major, but there's a certain point in time, my spring semester of my senior year, where everything was strategic and set up, and all of a sudden classes were being dropped because maybe they magically weren't being offered anymore, or they didn't have enough students enroll. So now it became, okay, I have to do petitions so I can, maybe take these somewhere else just so I can graduate, because we all know what St. Mary's tuition looks like. Okay. And we all know there's a cap on the financial aid. Okay. So, put that two and two together, we had to get out. So it was at that point where there was a lot of opposition because they made it very, very difficult to amend the courses, or at least have me take substitutions that were outside of SMC. But alas, through my big mouth and with my amazing allies who were advocating for me, I was able to walk that stage. And I was able to leave with, I believe, 2 credits remaining, which was what I started with in the semester. And then, things snowballed. And then again, people might think what they think, but I know what I know, right? So it's like, I know what's going to happen, and I know I'm going to cross that stage. So it was a very tumultuous semester, but in the end, I was able to get those things appealed. And then, graduate. So the process itself was pretty straightforward. I have a friend who did the same thing, and it was a little bit more difficult for them. I think it really just depends on understanding what they're asking of you, and having, solid sources to pull from as to what is required to graduate and what you need long term. And then most importantly, just having the confidence to know that, again, you know what you know, and it's going to happen regardless of whether they believe that right now or not.
Thank you for sharing. And yeah, absolutely. The college tuition at St. Mary's can be unbelievable. I have also had to take like a million classes outside of St. Mary's because it can be a lot. And Lauren, I had a question for you too. You mentioned earlier how you love the idea of having freedom to ask questions in what you do, and like creating this space where you can blend faith with social justice. And so I love that you mentioned that, and then you went on to talk about how you love to create like a safe space and show people that, you know, they've been told that faith and the LGBTQ community can't go together, but you create a space where it can. And so I would love to hear more about how you see faith and social justice playing a role in your work, and maybe any specific like examples of how you've done that, or any activities that you've done. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I feel like I kind of addressed that from two different sides. One being the education of kind of the people that already exist in the church space, because I think there's a lot of unlearning to happen there, and a lot of kind of this is how it's always been that is incredibly harmful. And so I think continually working on that has been one focus. Another has been, I've found an interesting community and ministry group on TikTok. There's actually a large group of progressive clergy on TikTok who kind of have similar perspectives, not all from the Christian faith, of the role of social justice and faith being connected. And so that has been really fascinating and led to ways that we've been able to work together to meet immediate needs that people have, or kind of brainstorm about larger ways to support kind of the faith and social justice intersection. I think, so I have only been at the Lafayette United Methodist Church since July 1st. In the United Methodist Church, we don't choose where we go, we get told. And so before this, I was in Redding, up north, which is very different than the Bay Area. And I think there, the intersection of social justice and faith was kind of at the visibility level, because there is a very large faith community there that believes that you cannot be like queer and Christian, or you know, disabilities are reflective of faith and things like that, or lack thereof, and just very different to how I see human beings. And so I think a lot of what we did as a church community there was to kind of show up to events, to Pride events, and to just different events in the community, and kind of present a different message. I think in Lafayette, it's more publicly combining of social justice and faith. It's not as an outlandish an idea, but I think it's still just as difficult to, I mean, it's predominantly white, and too often white communities of faith worship a white Jesus that somehow is stripped of the social justice that I think is integral to the life that Jesus led. And so for me, a lot of it is trying to put Jesus back in context as like a brown man who like walked and talked as like that being central to his identity. And for some reason, something that to me sounds like it shouldn't be that hard is continually difficult. But I think starting there, looking at ways that Christianity has done so much harm, and looking at ways that we can try to make things better, apologize for the harm that we've caused, and do differently, I think to me is how I see those intersecting.
Thank you so much for sharing. I love how you talked about education and like teaching people and like unlearning what people have learned previously. I feel like that's been a key message for me. I also, I thought about when you mentioned earlier the Bible class at St. Mary's. I feel like I was raised Catholic, and so I feel like I was taught this very different perspective on religion, but when I actually got to read the Bible, it was kind of like a whole awakening of like, oh man, like I had been taught something completely different than what's actually in the book. So I really like that. And our last question is, what's the most important lesson that you've learned on your journey thus far? And we're running a little short on time, so I will let both you and Eno speak first. And if I don't have time to share, that's fine. But I would love to hear about what you guys have learned on your amazing journeys so far.
I think that I've learned that a lot of life is projection, people projecting their own fears and their own insecurities onto you and out into the world. And also at the same time that everyone is experiencing some level of life for the first time. And the people who they're getting advice from experience it for the first time, and so on and on and on. So while people are of great guides and can be of great assistance, at the end of the day, it is our own individual journey and we are our own individual beings. And because of that, things are going to look and feel and be different for every single one of us. So just learning along the road that it's like things may seem scary and they may seem impossible, but at the end of the day, it's extremely rewarding to be true to yourself and walk in your own essence and to honor your spirit, you know, and who you are as a being. And even when you're faced with opposition, just to remind yourself that, you know, you love yourself enough to say yes to yourself, even when the world might be saying no. Um, and just even finding the smallest moments to say yes to yourself and just holding on to it. And eventually those small ones, you know, get bigger and bigger. So I think that throughout my journey and throughout, you know, the journeys that people share with me, that's always a very challenging thing to do. But and not that it's going to be done consistently, but those times that it is done, just honor that and yeah, honor it and recognize it and just allow yourself to enjoy more of those. And even if you're not there yet, just at least allow yourself to have it be an aspiration.
The different identities, some of which we've lifted up this evening. I think for a long time I thought were negatives about me. And you know, I think for a large part of my life, like I didn't disclose that I was an adoptee because I only saw how it was a negative. But I think that being able to own some of the different labels and ways that we exist and see the world, I think can be really great. I think they can make what we do and the way that we connect with others richer. And they can, I think, do that in surprising ways. Somebody might find something relatable or a point of connection that wouldn't have existed if we didn't disclose that. Obviously, it's not always safe or appropriate to do so, but when it is, I think that they can make the work and lives that we have much richer.
So I will, sorry. Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that I've learned in my journey is, I guess I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it, but I think for me is like not being quiet. Like I have to speak up. Like I can't let, like there's so many things that I'm passionate about. And for so long, I was just like quiet about it. And so I think in my journey is like, if I want to see a change in these things that I'm passionate about, I can't remain silent, you know, and I have to stand up, particularly I think in the community that I'm very passionate in advocating for. A lot of the times they are silenced because of their undocumented status. So I think that, you know, I have to use my voice as like my privileged voice in terms of like, I'm not undocumented. I have to use that privilege to be able to help the community that I want to give back to. So it's like, if I want to see this change, I can't be quiet. I have to stand up for the people that I care about and for my community. And so I think that's been the biggest thing. and I love to talk anyway. I'm a very outgoing person, so I can't be silenced in a way. But I think it's been my biggest learning is that, you know, to stand up for the things that I'm passionate about, and being able to create a change. So we're kind of nearing the end of our program, and so we always like to do a little raffle at the end of our program. So we're going to be raffling off a book, and today we're actually doing Professor Dao's book, Generation Rising: A New Politics of Southeast Asian American Activism. And she's actually here in the room with us. So, you know, we have a celebrity among us. And so I think we're going to do share and propose doing, everyone can just, I'm going to think of a number from 1 to 13, because that's how many of us there's in here now. And if you can just put it in the chat, and then maybe that will determine, yeah. Okay, so I was thinking of the number 8. So Brady, you're gonna get a copy of the book. And also, we also like to do, usually whoever stayed on camera the entire time usually also gets recognized. So Ali, you can also pick up a copy of Professor Dao's book at the Center for Women and Gender Equity. Sharon, is that correct? They can just come get it at the center.
Yep, that's right. And come by for coffee tomorrow. And I just want to, I don't want to take the floor away from you. Did you have anything else?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone and to our panelists. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yes, and I wanted to say also a special thank you to Lauren and Enno alums for coming in. Enno has an Etsy store, right? And I even talked to Enno about coming over on a Thursday morning. How can people find you on your Etsy store?
I can type it in the chat. It's called Bong Bong Creations. Because my name is Eno Bong, I feel like I always have to add that disclaimer. But yeah, I'll add it in the chat.
So that's great. And Natea is saying thanks for bearing with her, and she's also thanking Sophia. I want to thank Natea and Sophia. Natea, I think it's amazing that you shared such rich experience and perspective with us while also balancing motherhood duties. You kind of showed us what it looks like to try to navigate it all, and it's not easy, and I appreciate you being with us. And Sophia, you have so many things going on, and you showed up here, as do Enno and Lauren. So just thank you to all of you for being here, and I'm grateful for all of your contributions. I hope some of you will come over to campus tomorrow morning on Thursday in Center for Women and Gender Equity between 9 and about noon. We'll have coffee. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.